Welcome back to Always Evolving with me, Coach Mike. And my guest today, I would say he redefined a whole new category in self-help. Really, it's true. I mean, he's written books that have the best titles and have really good material. His name's Mark Manson. You maybe heard of his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, or Everything's Fucked, a book about hope. He's been in the writing game a long time, so thanks for joining me, Mark.
Good to be here.
I really feel like, I mean, your book, to put things in perspective for everyone, and everyone has seen that orange book that has hung out and been in every probably dorm room and table, and an executive will even put it in their office to try to send a message, to people who walk in the room. Like, did you ever think it would end up being this big?
No, I I always tell people like if you think your book's going to be this big, you're probably an asshole because it's it's I when I describe it to people who aren't familiar with publishing, it's kind of like the Avengers of publishing. Like you don't there's no way to expect that. You it's maybe in your wildest dreams it happens, but
Yeah, like how many of Subtle Art, how many millions have you sold?
it's over 12 million now.
Over 12 million books. And does that include audio or that's just books?
That includes audio. It's in over 60 languages now. Um, I think it was number one in like 13 different countries or something.
And
We just sold the Uzbek rights. Let's just put it that way. It's going to be published in Uzbekistan next
wow.
month. So
And so like this is a game that was a game changer for you.
yeah, it's complete life change.
And
And
and it really, in my opinion, like I said, after your book, suddenly everyone was coming out with fucking shit books everywhere. And I don't know if you were one of the first. Were you kind of one of the first books saying that?
I think there was one before me. Um, but yeah, it was within a year there was a whole shelf of them in the airport.
There was. Were you annoyed at all when you see all these books come out right out during that period of time?
Yeah, a little bit, but they say that imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah.
uh, but it was funny because for a while there I would get the criticism of like, oh, you just sold a lot of books because you had fuck in the title. Um, and then eventually my response to that was like, no, 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 it's not the fucking on the cover that sells the books. It's the Mark Manson on the cover that sells the books. Just like as like kind of a slap back in people's faces. But yeah, I mean there were a lot of imitations for the about a year or two afterwards.
And did you have in your mind that this was going to be in the self help category?
Yeah. Yeah, it was targeted. It's funny, Mike. It was very consciously targeted the way it was. And I wrote a book proposal kind of explaining how I wanted to write a self-help book for millennials. I wanted to write a self-help book for people who hate self-help, who think it's all bullshit. And I want to try to kind of redefine the category. Now, keep in mind, I'm writing this book like it's basically a sales pitch, and so I'm only kind of half believing what I'm writing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to hype this up a little bit, get some editor somewhere excited about it. Um, but that is really what ended up happening, and it even caught me by surprise. I'm like, oh wait, this actually happened.
Yeah, it's so awesome it happened. I love it whenever something disrupts or breaks through. Everyone and you seem to have a point of view that's fairly unshakable, right? In terms of like your messaging and how you put it. I also think I mean, you're brilliant at titles. Like even with Everything's Fucked, a book about hope. Like you could make a fortune just coming up with titles. You're really good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's a backup career that
No,
would be.
that's like mega career. I'm like all these Apple, everyone would be hiring you. They'd be like, come out with a name for a next product, and the product's got to be solid, right? But it's more than a title. What so in terms of your point of view and being in self help and kind of why you think so many people have been attracted to you, what do you think you're saying that people really need to hear?
Well, I think I feel like the self help industry, particularly of say the 80s, 90s, and early aughts, it was like when I was growing up and I was reading the self help books and watching the seminars and everything was about, positive thinking, believing in yourself, um, manifesting your reality, law of attraction, all those sorts of things. And, there is a lot of value in that stuff. But like a cynical millennial that I am, by the time I hit 30, I started feeling like, this is all a bunch of bullshit. Like the world kind of sucks. The even if you work really, really hard, sometimes things don't work out for you. And you have to live, you have to find a way to live with that. And it's sometimes things do get worse. And that's, you have to accept that. You
Mm,
can't ignore and so I felt like there was very much a need in the industry um, to kind of for there to kind of be a correction, like a negativity correction on all of kind of like the foo-foo positivity stuff. And that was initially my goal. I actually started doing it with my blog in 2012, 2013, and that really became popular, and it was clear that there was this a very large audience of people out there, particularly younger people, who wanted to improve themselves, wanted to improve their lives, but they weren't really buying into this same the same tropes from
mm.
20 years before.
Yeah, before, so I basically I was handpicked by Dr. Phil. I had no intention of being on television. 2 years ago, I met him. He asked me to go on an episode. 2 days later, I went on an episode. Now I'm like on all the time, done 40 of them. He's like, you need to write a book. Like, and before I worked with artists and creatives, and like, I remember J Lo posted a photo with me, and I didn't even have Instagram back then. Like I didn't think about it. It wasn't even like. Well, now I'm like, oh man, I would have like optically been so big or whatever. Um, but I'm newly introduced kind of to this. I would say coaching self help space, right? And the one thing that I found the coaching world to be a little bit like was it Best in Show, the movie with dogs, where there's all these characters in it. And it's almost like I come from the background where if somebody's struggling with something, you don't try to score a package deal for them to pay you. You're like, do they need what kind of therapist do they need or doctor? Like it's not a financially driven thing that we're trained. And I found in the coaching world it's very interesting because a lot of it is about that be happier, make more money. We're going to take you there. Power of positivity. Like there's this conversation that exists, and it seems like you're really outside of that, right?
Yeah, I openly encourage people to question that.
Yeah.
Like if you were sitting around thinking, man, if I could just make more money, I'll be happy. you know that 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 assumption itself is the problem. You don't need some $4,000 seminar to go tell you how to make a bunch of money. Like that's not going to make you happy, dude. It's the assumption itself that is the problem. And so it's really about just it's questioning a lot of those assumptions and asking yourself, it's like, why do I feel like I need to have more money? Why do I even feel like I need to be happier?
Mm.
Why can't I be bummed out for a while? There's something hard going on in my life. It's normal to be bummed out when something hard's going on in my life. I think there's just a lot of these implicit, unspoken assumptions that go along with kind of the typical self-help stuff, and it really started to bother me. So I try to poke holes in it.
What bothered you the most?
Um, well, what you said, you alluded to it briefly, and what you were saying was, the more I learned, so early on when I started developing an audience, I was like, oh shit, I need to like actually know what I'm talking about. So I spent I started, at this point I've spent many years like actually researching and reading papers and studies and psychology books and all this stuff, and understanding kind of where my the boundary of my expertise.
Yeah, your art, where your art form lives and breathes, and what's appropriate and what's not.
Totally, because
Yeah,
it's the same way where it's like, if you have, I don't know, if you have like a brain hemorrhage, you don't go to a nutritionist, like
right.
you go to a brain doctor, right? So it's like if somebody has like severe schizophrenia, like I'm not your guy. You need to go to a psychiatrist, right?
Yeah,
But it's like we don't have that same kind of hierarchy of expertise in the personal development self-help world, So it's, people with legitimate mental health problems are getting pitched on spending their life savings on a seminar and given by somebody who has absolutely no mental health training whatsoever. And to me, that's just a huge ethical problem, period, with the
mm.
industry. And so it is getting better. I do, I think, particularly with like coaching certifications and stuff like that, like it is, there's more, I guess, credentialism that's starting to happen. But it's, to me, that is a openly um, problematic thing about the industry and something that I am very outspoken about.
Yeah, I wrote a treatment, and I'll email it to you. It's short, and it's based upon inspired by my life, and it's about someone in the coaching industry and coming across all these different coaches and what happens. So I'll send it over to you. I'd be curious what you think because I think you'll. I think you. I think. I think you'll probably get kind of what it is because that, and I guess that's really what it's about, right? It's like when things bother you or you want to say something and you feel and this is across anything really, it's like how do you turn that frustration into inspiration, or how do you turn that annoyance into um, doing something that's creative, right? Because otherwise we sit on it and it sucks. After a while it's like I'm annoyed, and after a while it just starts to eat at you. So, like, you, like, where are you at in terms of like what you're creating now?
Um, it's really interesting because
And by the way, your hair is amazing. Like, I know this is a podcast, you guys, but if you watch on Instagram or Facebook, his hair, like, I wish I had that hair.
what's funny, man? I originally, so the pandemic started and my hair salon closed down, and so I couldn't get a haircut for like 6 months. And then the hair started growing out, and it turns out I've got this like luscious curly hair thing going. And my wife is like, "What the hell? Where did this come from?" She's like, "You were not cutting it; you were letting it grow." So I'm like, I'm just along for the
Did
ride.
you even put anything in it today?
No, dude, I mean, I'm literally just
It's like what are those weeds that it's like a beautiful tumbleweed on your head. It's like it's amazing. I love it. I have to get a haircut every like 5 days. And if I don't get a haircut every 5 days, I look like Father Time. Like I just start wasting away. You just let it go, and it's amazing.
a beautiful tumbleweed. That is one of the best compliments I've gotten in a long
Good. So creatively, what are you currently working on?
time. That's an interesting question because it's the massive success of the books is actually complicated that for a while. Like there was definitely a little bit of holy crap, I sold 10 million books. What am I like? Anything I do now is going to feel like paltry in comparison or whatever. So um, these days, I'm actually I've been really, in terms of just my like what's inspiring me
Mm.
at the moment. I'm like getting into a lot of philosophy. I don't know if it's the craziness of 2020, but I found myself kind of going back to like, stuff you're supposed to read in college, but I was too busy partying to
Like
actually read it.
Descartes and like all that. You're going.
Yeah, like I got really into Nietzsche last year, and then this year I've been reading like a lot of like the about like existentialism and things like that, and I'm just really digging it. And so I've always kind of seen my role, like what I do is I take a lot of very complex psychological and philosophical ideas, and I kind of like translate it down into like consumable bites for people. Um, and so that's kind of what's driving me these days. And I don't really know where it's going to take me, but I'm having a lot of fun with it.
So it's basically you're studying philosophy and having fun with philosophy, but you're like I saw a while back you were like writing with Will Smith or and did that come to life or
Yeah. So weird thing with publishing timelines. So I've, the book is already written. Um, so I'm Will Smith and I are co-writing his memoir. Um, and I spent much of 2018 and early 2019 with him, just kind of traveling around with him, being a
mm-hmm.
fly on the wall, talking to him a lot about his life and meeting his family and his team and everything. And it's built a book out of it. And so actually just finished up the draft for that this summer.
God, that's so different than what you've done too.
It is, but it isn't.
No?
I thought it was kind of strange when they reached out. I thought it was kind of. I was like, well, this is odd. But then once I got to know him, I'm like, oh, it actually makes sense. Like he's very. One of the first things he told me is he said, I don't want this to just be like an autobiography. He said, I don't want to just write my life. I want somebody who can like pull the lessons and like things that kind of define who I am and put that on the page. So I kind of describe it as like two-third memoir and then like one-third like life lessons from Will Smith.
Mm.
And he is an incredibly impressive person. So it was really a joy to just kind of like pick his brain for months.
Did you have put a lot of pressure on yourself where you're like, oh well,
It was weird at first. Um, I mean, it definitely took a few months to kind of get over the like, oh my God, I'm sitting in a room with Will Smith and he's like telling me about his childhood. Like that's,
yeah, but you're the Will Smith of like writing and self help. Like
I guess so.
like to be honest, I mean, respectfully, Will Smith can't sell as many books as you in self help. So you sell a lot more than him. But yes, in his lane, he's massive.
Well, and there's a weird thing too where I think when you grow up with somebody like it's like I lost my virginity watching Men in Black, like
Mm.
that, true story. And it's like he was such a formative person for my generation in the 90s.
He really gave you that encouragement during the movie.
Yes. When I told him that, I was like, yeah, man, Tommy Lee Jones, right? Like
Yeah.
girls just get all hot and bothered. um, but yeah, I mean, so there was a little bit of like a surreal, I can't believe this is happening type of thing. But interestingly, it's like after that, it was kind of the opposite. It was actually like very little pressure. Part of it is just he's great. He's like he's I mean, he is who he is for a reason. So he has a very intuitive understanding of how to work with people, how to give you space, how to like not put pressure on you to kind of get the best out of you.
Mm.
But then it in many ways I found it easier because I find it's much harder to figure out if your own ideas are good or not than it is to like decide if.
You're so. By the way, you're so right. You're so right. Like I got to tell you, so I have a book coming out December 29th called One Decision. I'm going to send you a decision box. I'm sending out like 100 of these boxes, right? And there's little stuff that relates to the book. I push myself never to copy, like ever, like to the point where like I drive myself crazy. So I had random strangers showing up at my house off Facebook to try out all the things I'm doing in the book. But like just left to my own thinking. And even doing that, you're like, one sentence, you can literally be like, is this true? Like, is this really true? Or is this because my parents got divorced and I'm a little like bothered about it? Or, it's,
And you go through this roller coaster where it's like when you're writing it, you're like, man, I am such a genius. I am killing this so hard. And then you wake up the next day and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, it's terrible. Nobody's going to read this. Nobody's going to like this, And then it's 2 days later, you're like, no, 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 this is really, really good, And it's just, it is an emotional roller coaster.
yeah.
And there's a lot of insecurity involved because you don't have that perspective. But yeah, with him, it was just like I basically just sat down and listened to him for 20 or 30 hours, and I was like, "That's gold. That's gold. We're gonna leave that out, but that's great. We'll keep that." And so it was more like I was a curator of his ideas than
Mm.
anything.
And so you you work with him and you're putting out that product together. And by the way, congrats. That's awesome when somebody seeks you out because they love your style of writing. What is your like ritual for writing? Meaning that the ritual could have absolutely no sense to it at all, but like if you were to look back at like when you feel not based upon what other people think, right? But when you feel like you're in your greatest flow, like are you indoors, outdoors, at your computer? Or are you like what is it?
For me, it's really it's locking yourself in a room and hoping for the best. I once told a friend of mine, I said, the more I do this, the more I become convinced that there there's not really such thing as inspiration. There's lack of distraction.
Mm,
So for me, I I've got all like social media and everything. It's all blocked on my work computer. I don't have access to it. If I'm working on a book or something, I leave the phone outside the office, and I basically just shut myself in for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And some days I sit there and agonize and stare at a screensaver, and wonder what I'm doing with my life. And some days you come in and it just pours out of you. And what I've found is that there's there's no rhyme or reason to it that I can figure out. All I know is that I just need to show up X amount of days, and it'll eventually start happening.
and do you play
And
music?
yeah, I listen to a lot of music.
Is there certain types of music though where you're like, oh, I just need to put that track on again? Because that, do you ever do that?
Yeah, I'm an upbeat music guy. I like a lot of like intense electronic music. I like heavy metal, um, and it gets me into a flow a little bit easier. And
Mm,
if I do find one track that I'm like really like ripping,
yeah.
I'll like put that track on repeat for an hour or two. Um, so yeah, music's very helpful.
Yeah, I had on the this podcast I had this DJ who I love. He honestly he must have thought I was a little weird because I made videos dancing to his song. Like I hit up his manager, right? And his name's Lane 8, and he has this song called Sunday Song. And during the pandemic, Sunday Song, it was like I had a loving relationship with that where I was just creating all the time. But then when I had him on the podcast, I kind of was like, I don't know, am I creeping this dude out? Like, because his affect was such that like I was like, okay, like, but he's a cool dude. But that for me was definitely a song of the summer. What song right now are you like? If you're a few like artist wise, are you kind of loving to turn on?
We're recording this right after Eddie Van Halen died.
Mm.
So I've been on this. I hadn't listened to Van Halen in like 15 years, so I'm on this big Van Halen rabbit hole, and I'm like, read actually, when I was young, I didn't like the Sammy Hagar stuff, and like now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, this is actually really good. It's like
Yeah.
it was like this is how you know you're old, is you start liking Sammy Hagar more than David Bowie. Um, but yeah, I that and when I do electronic music, I'm a big fan of Anjuna beats,
Who?
above and beyond. Anjuna beats, so they're actually
How
like
do you
kind of a
spell that?
ANJ.
Oh yeah, they got all those tracks on Spotify, all the mixes. Oh hell yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they're amazing. So like James Grant, Jody Wisternoff, I think Lane Eight's on a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they're phenomenal.
Let me ask you: did you, when you were in high school, and you were in English class, did you get good grades?
No, no.
Like, did you write kind of in the same style, but it was just not graded well, or?
um, you know, it took me a long time to figure. First of all, it took me a long time to figure out I was a good writer. And then second, it took me a long time to figure out that the reason I got bad grades in school was because I didn't follow the assignment.
Hmm.
Um, I was coloring outside the box, so to speak, and that's what I got knocked for. But being 15 or whatever, I was just like, oh, I suck at English.
Got it. You just weren't like. It wasn't like. When did you realize you were a good writer? Like, what was the moment?
Um, so I started blogging in 2008, and initially you know so way back in the day, back in 2008, if you were trying to start an internet business or get traffic or whatever, Facebook and Twitter, it wasn't what it is now. So the way you got traffic was blogging, because Google's algorithm really liked blogs. So I was trying to start e-commerce businesses, um, and doing like affiliate marketing and like selling teeth whiteners and shit. And
Teeth pointers?
teeth whiteners.
Oh, teeth whiteners.
Yeah, really exciting stuff. And the way you would market a website or get traffic to your website back then was create a blog and like write a bunch of little articles. And it turned out I was really good at that. And I had one of my sites was it was for like dating advice. And that blog, it started to develop a readership. And I'd say by the time I was by like 2011, 2010, 2011, I realized that I should just give up the whole e-commerce thing and just blog. And I think that was kind of the moment where I realized that, and people started emailing me saying, you should write a book. I would totally buy your book. You're the only blogger I read every day, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, really? Me? Holy crap. All right. Um,
How did you monetize a blog?
so back in those days, you would do like ebooks, like little
Hmm.
50-page PDFs. So you'd come up with a bunch of little topics, sell these PDFs for like 5.99 or 9.99. Make sell a few hundred of those each month, and it's enough to pay your rent, whatnot.
Got it. And do you ever have interest in working with people one on one in a like coaching sense, or do you rather not be in that flow?
So I worked with people one on one for about 5 years.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, most people don't actually. I actually stopped right around the time I got my book deal. I was like, got a book deal, don't need to do this anymore. um, it was, um, I liked it. I didn't love it. I love the writing. I love the writing process. I love you know, everything about it. I liked coaching. I didn't love it.
When let me ask you this. Sorry to jump in, but when you were coaching people, right? So I've been doing it forever, right? And so I'm just curious because it's like when you're not in your art of it, but you're doing it. Was there any moment with certain clients where you were just like, "What the hell am I doing? And why am I doing this?"
Oh, come on. Everybody's got those clients. I know you know that. That's why you're asking.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Can you share anything that's not?
You know, I can't think of I vaguely remember a couple of clients that just, it was like banging my head against the wall. I can't remember anything specific that they used to say or do, but the thing about coaching is it's um, there's one of my big epiphanies back when I used to coach was somebody told me like a much more experienced coach than I was. He told me, he's like, you can fire your clients, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it was like head explode. Oh my God, because it's just some people. It took me a long time to figure out that sometimes there's just not chemistry. It's just you and them that you see the world differently. It's not the right fit, whatever. That's it's nobody's fault. It's fine. But sometimes too, I found that people sought out a coach as kind of another form of avoidance.
Mm.
It was a way for them to tell themselves like, well, I'm talking to this guy an hour every week, um, and he's telling me what to do. And so it kind of alleviated that responsibility for them actually changing or taking on new behaviors, in their mind. And those were the worst clients because they're not coming to you for help; they're coming to you for validation.
Mm.
Uh, and I think it was right around the time I kind of figured that out and started weeding those clients out of my practice. Um, that the blog took off, the book deal came, and I was like, I don't have to do this. Um, so I'm just gonna.
And what was your like? What was the when you feel like the type of person though? Because anyone who does something for 5 years has to have certain arena where like they were like, oh yeah, because I'm sure you made some magic happen with people too. So it's like it's not all, you know. Um, but what type of person do you feel like when you were like, yeah, like this type of person is right up my alley, and
Yeah, my wheelhouse.
yeah,
So my wheelhouse was the I would say it was the overachieving single 30-year-old male. So basically, it was usually guys who they were nerds in school, um, very smart, very successful. They went to law school or medical school or whatever. Like they worked their asses off, and suddenly they wake up one day and they're 30 and they've got all these degrees and they're making a bunch of money, and they're like, wait, I don't have a life. Like I don't have a life, I don't have a girlfriend, I don't like have any hobbies, I don't have many friends. Like what am I doing wrong?
mm.
Those were kind of like my bread and butter guys, and I really enjoyed those guys because they knew how to push themselves and put the work in. They just needed somebody to kind of like draw the map for.
They needed someone to help them guide them towards what they wanted because they were just their actions weren't lining up with what they actually wanted. Maybe
Exactly,
I
exactly.
gotcha. All right, well, you guys, you got to go to his website, markmanson.net. You got to buy all the fuck books. And he also had a book called Models, was it? Right? Back in the day, that was your first, kind of dance in the publishing world, right?
It was self-published.
Self published.
Yeah.
So, and that's about women and dating and.
It's called Models Attract Women Through Honesty, and it was written because and this is why the 30-year-old overachiever guys tend to be my wheelhouse because that's how they found me. But it's at the time most of the men's dating advice out there was very sleazy and manipulative and like pickup lines and stuff like that, and so thought the world needed I thought the men of the world and the women of the world deserved a book that wasn't sleazy, that gave like emotionally healthy advice to men of like how to go about their dating life.
Yeah, because by the way, it's so true that so many men start off not being totally honest, and then they end up in a spot where they feel like they can't say what they really mean or feel, and then all of a sudden they're feeling inauthentic, and friction happens and whatever. So this just is a book that really helps people understand the necessity of just being honest in a relationship, right? And so, everyone, check out markmanson.net. It's been a total pleasure having you on Always Evolving. And you are inspiring to me the word I used it, inspiring. Slightly jealous because he's crushed it in this world. But thanks, man, for coming on, Mark.